She watched him from the shadows for 3 years, loving a king who didn't know she existed, until the night her boyfriend's fists brought that king to her door, eyes blazing red with a fury that would reshape her entire world. Lena's hands trembled as she pressed the concealer beneath her left eye, the purple bruise blooming despite her efforts. 3rd time this month. She'd gotten good at this, the careful application, the angling away from light, the practiced smile that never reached her eyes. The bathroom mirror showed a stranger now, 26 years old but exhausted in ways that aged her beyond recognition. Through the thin apartment walls, she heard Derek's voice rising at the television, anger simmering as always. It was Tuesday. On Tuesdays, if she was careful, if she was silent enough, she could slip out to the cafe on Bourbon Street. Not because she needed coffee. Because for 20 minutes every Tuesday evening, like clockwork, he walked past. Dominic Ashford. The vampire king of the Southern Territories. She'd first seen him 3 years ago during a rare moment of freedom, before Derek's grip had tightened completely. Dominic had been standing outside the old cathedral, moonlight making his dark hair almost blue-black, his presence so commanding that humans and vampires alike gave him wide berth. He'd been settling a dispute between 2 vampire families, his voice low and absolute, the kind of voice that didn't need to shout to promise destruction. Lena had frozen on the sidewalk, coffee forgotten in her hand, and watched him restore order with nothing but words and the weight of his reputation. They called him brutal. Unforgiving. A king who'd ruled for 2 centuries with an iron fist wrapped in dark charisma. They said he'd once decimated an entire bloodline for harming a human child under his protection, that he'd waited generations to repay a betrayal, that his enemies disappeared so thoroughly even their names were forgotten. But she'd seen something else that night. A flash of weariness when he thought no one was looking. A heaviness in those ancient amber eyes. She'd fallen in love right there on the sidewalk, helplessly and hopelessly, with a man who was not a man at all, who would never notice someone like her. Now, she tucked her hair forward to hide the bruise and grabbed her jacket. Derek barely looked up as she mumbled something about needing air. He grunted permission, already 3 beers deep into his nightly routine. The streets of New Orleans pulsed with their usual magic, but Lena moved through them like a ghost, counting the blocks to Bourbon Street. 17 minutes until he'd pass by. She ordered tea she wouldn't drink and took her usual corner table with a view of the street. Across the city, in a restored mansion that had belonged to his family since before the Civil War, Dominic Ashford stood at the window of his study, a glass of blood wine untouched in his hand. 243 years old, and he'd never felt the weight of them more acutely than in recent months. His second-in-command, a vampire named Julian, was speaking about territory disputes, but Dominic's attention had drifted. It drifted often lately, always in the same direction, toward a mystery he couldn't quite name. A scent he'd caught in passing. A flutter of movement in his peripheral vision. The sense of being watched, not with fear or calculation, but with something warmer. Something that made his long-dormant heart ache with phantom beats. This is what loneliness does to you, he thought darkly. 2 centuries of watching humans love and lose and love again while you remain untouched. Untouchable. He'd had lovers, of course. Vampire women who understood the game, the politics, the necessary distance. But love? Real, devastating, foolish love? He'd locked that away after Elizabeth died in 1867, her human life burning out like a candle while he'd been forced to watch, unable to turn her, forbidden by laws he'd later helped abolish. Never again, he'd sworn. Never again would he give his heart to something so breakable. Dominic, Julian said, pulling him back. Are you even listening? Dominic turned from the window, his expression shifting into the mask of cold authority his people expected. I'm listening. Tell the Rousseau family that if they can't control their newborns, I'll do it for them. Permanently. Julian nodded and left, accustomed to his king's dark moods. Alone again, Dominic checked his watch. Tuesday evening. Time for his walk through the quarter, the route he took weekly to remind both vampire and human who kept order in the city. He shrugged into his black coat, the one that made him look like he'd stepped out of another century, and headed into the night. He didn't admit, even to himself, that he took this particular route because sometimes, just sometimes, he caught that scent again. Jasmine and something uniquely human. Warm bread and hope. Lena's pulse quickened as she saw him turn the corner. Right on time. She angled her face away, watching from behind her teacup as Dominic Ashford moved down Bourbon Street like a king surveying his kingdom. People parted without thinking, some instinct warning them of the predator in their midst. But Lena saw past the danger. She saw the careful way he nodded to the elderly woman outside the bookstore, a human who'd lived in the quarter for 60 years. Saw how his eyes tracked a drunk stumbling too close to traffic, making sure the man got safely to the sidewalk. Saw the loneliness he carried like a cloak. She loved him more each time she saw him. Uselessly. Silently. Dominic paused mid-step, his head turning slightly. There. That scent again. Jasmine and warmth. His eyes scanned the cafe, moving past the usual faces, the tourists, the locals. They snagged for just a moment on a young woman with dark hair tucked forward, her face angled down, her fingers wrapped around a teacup like it was anchoring her to earth. Something in his chest twisted. He couldn't see her clearly, but something about the curve of her shoulders, the careful stillness of her posture, called to him. Move along, he told himself. She's human. She's fragile. She's none of your concern. He forced himself to keep walking. Behind him, Lena released a breath she hadn't known she was holding. For a moment, just a moment, she thought he was going to come inside. Terror and hope had warred in her chest. But he'd moved on, as he always did, and she was left with her secret intact and her heart still safely broken. She checked the time. She'd stayed too long. Derek would be getting suspicious. Lena hurried home through darkening streets, slipping into the apartment with practiced quiet. But Derek was waiting this time, his face flushed with more than just beer. Where the hell have you been? Just walking, she said softly, slipping off her jacket. I told you I needed air. 3 weeks later, on another Tuesday night, everything would change. But in this moment, Lena simply braced herself for the accusations, the anger, the inevitable pain, and thought of Amber Eyes and a king who walked alone, and survived. If you're feeling what Lena's feeling right now, that ache of loving someone from afar, then don't just watch in silence. Hit that subscribe button and join the fastest growing vampire love stories community on YouTube. We're building something special here, a place where broken hearts find their kings and queens. And tell me in the comments, where in the world are you watching this from? Are you Team Lena, or do you think she should have run long ago? I genuinely want to know where my story lovers are enjoying this from. Now, let me show you what happens when a king finally sees his queen. 3 weeks of carefully timed walks. 3 weeks of Derek's suspicions growing like mold in darkness. Lena knew she was pushing her luck, but those Tuesday evenings were the only thing keeping her alive. Not physically. Spiritually. Tonight, Derek had found the cafe receipt in her jacket pocket. You lying whore, he snarled, shoving her against the kitchen counter. Who is he? Who are you meeting? No one, Lena gasped, pain exploding across her ribs where she'd hit the drawer handle. Derek, please, I just sit there. I just need space to breathe. Space? His hand closed around her throat. I give you everything. This apartment. Food. And you need space? The edges of her vision darkened. She clawed at his fingers, terror flooding her system. He'd never gone this far before. Never cut off her air completely. Through the rushing in her ears, she heard the apartment door explode inward. Not open. Explode. Wood splintered like it was nothing, the lock and chain simply ceasing to exist. Derek's hand released her instantly. Lena collapsed to the floor, gasping, and looked up through tears. The Vampire King stood in her doorway. But this wasn't the controlled, careful man she'd watched from afar. This was something ancient and terrible, something that made the air itself feel heavy with threat. Dominic Ashford's eyes blazed pure red, the amber completely consumed by predatory rage. His presence filled the small apartment like a storm, electricity crackling in the space around him. He looked at Derek first, then his gaze dropped to Lena on the floor, hand at her throat, bruises blooming on her arms, terror and confusion warring in her eyes. The temperature in the room plummeted. "Well now," Dominic said, his voice carrying a British accent that centuries in America hadn't quite erased, smooth as silk and sharp as a blade. "What do we have here? A man who puts his hands on women. How delightfully pathetic." Derek stumbled backward. "Who the hell are you? This is my home, you can't just..." "Can't?" Dominic's smile was beautiful and horrible. He took one step into the apartment, and Derek pressed himself against the wall. "Do you know who I am, boy?" Derek's face had gone white. The recognition was dawning. Every human in New Orleans knew the Vampire King by sight, by reputation, by the survival instinct that said run. "Please," Derek whispered. "Please, I didn't know she's not, we're just having a disagreement." "A disagreement?" Dominic's head tilted, the movement predatory, inhuman. He crossed to Lena in 2 fluid strides and crouched beside her, his rage banking just enough to gentle his voice. "Let me see." Lena couldn't breathe for entirely different reasons now. Up close, he was devastating. Sharp cheekbones, full lips, those ancient eyes that had seen empires fall. And the way he looked at her, really saw her, for the first time. "Your neck," he said softly. "May I?" She nodded, mute with shock. His fingers, cool and steady, tilted her chin up. She felt his thumb brush featherlight over the handprints forming on her throat. Something murderous flickered across his expression. "How long?" he asked, still gentle, still looking only at her. 6 months, Lena whispered. "It got bad 6 months ago." Dominic closed his eyes briefly, as if gathering patience. When they opened again, the red had darkened to something almost black. He rose in one smooth motion and turned to Derek. "Here's what's going to happen," he said, his voice dropping into something that promised unspeakable violence. "You're going to leave this city. Tonight. Within the hour. You will go far from New Orleans, far from Louisiana entirely, and you will never, never speak her name again." Derek found some stupid well of courage. "Or you'll what? Kill me? There are laws, even for vampires." "The council." "The council," Dominic interrupted, "answer to me." He smiled then, and it was the smile of something that had hunted humans for sport in darker centuries. "But you're right. I won't kill you. That would be mercy. No, I'm going to do something far more interesting." He moved faster than human eyes could track, suddenly inches from Derek's face. "I'm going to let you live. Let you run. And you're going to spend every day for the rest of your miserable existence wondering if I've forgiven this. Wondering if I've forgotten." He leaned closer, voice dropping to a whisper that Lena could still somehow hear. "Spoiler alert, I never forget. I once waited 70 years to repay a man who stole from my family. 70 years. I attended his grandson's wedding. Lovely ceremony." He paused. "Right before I burned his entire legacy to ash." Derek's bladder failed. The sharp smell of urine filled the apartment. Dominic wrinkled his nose. "Pathetic. Get out of my sight. 1 hour. If you're still in my city after that, I'll reconsider the mercy." Derek ran, stumbling over debris from the door, his footsteps echoing down the hallway in panicked rhythm. The silence he left behind was deafening. Lena sat on the floor, shaking, watching as the Vampire King turned back to her. The rage drained from his expression, replaced by something cautious. Concerned. "Are you hurt elsewhere?" he asked. She shook her head, then found her voice. "How did you know? How did you find me?" Dominic looked almost embarrassed, a strange expression on such an ancient face. "I've been following your scent for weeks. Every Tuesday, I catch it on Bourbon Street, jasmine and warmth, and tonight it was laced with fear so sharp I could taste it from 3 blocks away." He ran a hand through his dark hair. "I tracked it here and heard him choking you through the door." "You broke down the door for me," Lena said wonderingly. "You don't even know me." "Don't I?" His eyes searched hers, and something in them made her breath catch. "I've seen you. At the cafe. You watch me when you think I'm not looking." His voice softened. "You're the woman who loves me from the shadows." Lena's face flamed. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to, I know you wouldn't." He crouched again, bringing them eye level. "What's your name?" "Lena. Lena." He said it like he was tasting wine. "I'm Dominic Ashford," she whispered. "The Vampire King. I know who you are. Everyone knows who you are. And yet you looked at me like I was just a man," he said quietly. "Every Tuesday for 3 months, you sat in that cafe and looked at me like I was worth something beyond fear." The moment stretched between them, fragile and huge. Then Dominic stood and offered his hand. "Come. You can't stay here tonight. I have guest rooms, you'll be safe, and tomorrow we'll sort out the practical matters." Lena stared at his outstretched hand. 3 years of loving him from afar. 6 months of surviving hell. And now this, a king offering sanctuary, looking at her like she mattered. She took his hand. His fingers closed around hers, cool and strong, and Lena felt the first flutter of hope she'd known in months. Neither of them saw Derek watching from the building across the street, rage and humiliation curdling into something darker. Running wasn't in his nature. And Vampire King or not, no one made Derek Hansen look weak. But that reckoning was still hours away. For now, Dominic led Lena into the New Orleans night, toward his mansion, toward safety, toward a fate neither of them could yet imagine. The Ashford mansion rose before them like something out of a Gothic dream, all wrought iron and old brick, gas lamps flickering along the pathway despite the modern city humming around it. Lena had passed this place 100 times, never imagining she'd walk through its gates. Dominic led her inside without ceremony, his hand still loosely holding hers, as if he'd forgotten he was touching her. The interior was exactly what she'd imagined and nothing like it at all. Yes, there were oil paintings of stern ancestors and furniture that belonged in museums. But there were also books stacked haphazardly on tables, a half-finished chess game, a record player with actual vinyl scattered around it. It looked lived in. Lonely, but lived in. "This way," Dominic said, guiding her up a curved staircase. His voice had gone formal again, careful. "The guest wing is private. You'll have your own bathroom, and I'll have my housekeeper bring you clothes." Lena stopped on the landing. "Why are you doing this?" He turned, confusion flickering across his face. "You were in danger. What else would I do? You could have just scared him off and left. You didn't have to bring me here. To your home." Something guarded slipped into his expression. "Don't mistake this for more than it is. I protect humans in my territory. It's my responsibility, nothing personal." The words stung more than they should have. Of course. What had she expected? That he'd felt the same impossible pull she had? That 3 years of her silent devotion meant anything to a man who'd lived centuries? "Right," Lena said quietly. I understand. Thank you for your help. Dominic watched her withdraw, watched the warmth leave her eyes, and hated himself for it. But this was necessary. Already he could feel the dangerous flutter in his chest when he looked at her, the way his body had moved on pure instinct when he'd sensed her fear, the absolute rage that had consumed him seeing another man's hands on her throat. He'd broken his own rules tonight. He didn't personally intervene in domestic disputes. He had people for that. But he'd heard her fear and moved without thinking, and that was dangerous. That was how you got attached. How you started to care. How you set yourself up for loss. The guest room is here, he said, opening a door to reveal a beautiful space decorated in soft grays and blues. There's a lock on the inside. Use it if it makes you feel safer. Safer from what? She asked. You just saved me. Old habits, he said. Trust takes time. She studied him then, really looked at him, and Dominic had the uncomfortable sensation of being seen through. Do you ever let anyone close? She asked softly. Or do you keep everyone at arm's length with those walls you've built? He should have been angry at her presumption. Instead, he found himself almost smiling. You're perceptive. You're lonely, she said. I recognize it because I am too. The moment hung between them, honest and raw. Then Dominic stepped back. Good night, Lena. We'll talk in the morning about getting you a new place to stay. Somewhere safe. Somewhere far from here. He closed the door before she could respond, before he could do something foolish like tell her she could stay forever, before he could admit that in 3 months of watching her watch him, he'd started taking that route just to catch her scent, just to see if she'd be there. Outside in the hallway, he leaned against the wall and pressed his palms to his eyes. 243 years old, and a human woman with bruises and hope in her eyes had undone him in one evening. Inside the room, Lena sat on the edge of the bed and touched her throat where his fingers had been so gentle. She'd spent 3 years loving him from afar, thinking it was safe, thinking she could keep it locked inside. Now he'd touched her. Saved her. Brought her into his home. And she was more in love than ever with a man who clearly wanted nothing to do with the complication she represented. She should leave in the morning. Find her own way. Stop torturing herself with impossible dreams. But even as she thought it, she knew she wouldn't. Not yet. Not when she'd finally been close enough to see that the loneliness in his eyes matched her own. Downstairs, Dominic poured himself blood wine he didn't want and stared at nothing. Julian appeared in the doorway of the study. I heard you brought home a stray. Dominic's eyes flashed red in warning. Watch your tongue. Julian held up his hands. Just saying, you don't usually get personally involved. What's special about this one? Nothing, Dominic said too quickly. She was being hurt. I intervened. She'll be gone by tomorrow. Will she? She will, Dominic insisted. But neither he nor Julian believed it. Upstairs, Lena finally lay down in the softest bed she'd felt in years, and allowed herself to cry. For the relief of being safe. For the pain of loving someone unreachable. For the strange, terrifying hope blooming in her chest despite everything telling her to crush it. Tomorrow she'd be strong. Tonight, she let herself break. Neither of them slept. The house settled around them, 2 lonely souls under one roof, both fighting the pull between them, both losing. Morning came gray and humid, typical New Orleans weather that wrapped the city in a blanket of warm mist. Lena woke disoriented, momentarily panicking at the unfamiliar ceiling before memory rushed back. The apartment. Derek. The door exploding inward. Amber eyes turning red. She found clothes laid out on a chair near the door. Simple things, a soft sweater and jeans that somehow fit perfectly. She didn't want to think about how he'd known her size. Downstairs, she followed the smell of coffee and found a kitchen that mixed antique charm with modern appliances. Dominic stood at the stove, his back to her, doing something that looked suspiciously like cooking. "You cook," she said. He turned, and for a moment his expression was unguarded. Soft. Almost pleased to see her. Then the mask slipped back into place. "I've had 2 centuries to learn. Sit." Lena sat at the kitchen island, watching him plate eggs and toast with practiced ease. He set the food before her, then poured her coffee without asking how she took it. "Black," she said. "How did you know?" "You ordered it black at the cafe. Every Tuesday." Heat crept up her neck. "You noticed that?" "I noticed everything about you, Lena." He said it matter-of-factly, like it wasn't a confession that made her heart stutter. Then he frowned. "We have a problem. Beyond the obvious? Your boyfriend. Ex-boyfriend. He didn't leave the city." Lena's fork froze halfway to her mouth. "What?" "My people tracked him to a motel on the outskirts. He's been making phone calls, reaching out to certain unsavory elements who deal in vampire hunting equipment." Dominic's jaw tightened. "He's planning something stupid." Fear coiled in her stomach. Derek was many things, but he wasn't a complete fool. If he was staying, if he was harming himself, it meant he'd rather die trying to get revenge than live with the humiliation. "What do I do?" she whispered. "Nothing." Dominic's voice was firm. "You stay here until I've dealt with him." "Dealt with him how?" "That depends entirely on how stubborn he wants to be." Dominic sipped his own cup, which definitely didn't contain coffee. "The point is, you can't leave yet. It's not safe." He paused. "Unless you want to leave. I can arrange protection elsewhere if my presence makes you uncomfortable." Lena almost laughed. "Uncomfortable? I've loved you for 3 years. Being near you is the opposite of uncomfortable." The words hung in the air between them. She hadn't meant to say that. Not so plainly. Not while looking directly into his eyes. Dominic went very still. "Say that again." "I said, I've loved you for 3 years." Lena's voice trembled, but she didn't look away. "I know it's pathetic. I know you're a king and I'm nobody. I know you've probably had hundreds of women far more beautiful and interesting than me. But I watched you every Tuesday because seeing you was the best part of my week. Because even from a distance, you made me feel like there was still magic in the world. Because when Derek was hurting me, I would close my eyes and imagine someone like you coming to save me." She laughed, but it came out broken. "And then you actually did. So yes. I love you. I've loved you since the first moment I saw you standing outside that cathedral, looking like loneliness had a face." The silence stretched so long Lena wanted the floor to swallow her whole. Then Dominic moved. He rounded the island in 2 steps, standing so close she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. His hand came up, hesitated, then gently cupped her cheek. "You are the most terrifying thing that has happened to me in 200 years, he said quietly. "Do you understand that? I have faced down vampire armies. I have overthrown kings. I have survived things that would drive most creatures mad. But you, sitting in that cafe with your jasmine scent and your sad eyes, watching me like I was worthy of something good. You terrify me, Lena." "Why?" "Because I want to keep you." His thumb brushed her cheekbone. "And everything I've ever wanted to keep has been taken from me." Lena reached up and covered his hand with her own. "I'm not going anywhere." The moment held, fragile as spun glass. Then Dominic stepped back, breaking the contact, his expression shuddering again. "We should focus on the immediate threat. Derek." Until he's neutralized, you stay in the mansion. Agreed? Agreed, Lena said, though her heart was still pounding from his touch. Good. I have calls to make. Feel free to explore the house, use the library, anything you need. Just don't leave the grounds. He was halfway out of the kitchen when she called after him. Dominic. He paused but didn't turn. You said everything you've wanted to keep has been taken. She took a breath. Maybe this time will be different. He was silent for a long moment. Then, barely audible, maybe. And he was gone. Lena sat alone in the kitchen, touching her cheek where his hand had been, feeling like the world had shifted on its axis and nothing would ever be the same. Let me ask you something, and I need you to really think about this. If someone had loved you silently for 3 years, watching from the shadows, never expecting anything in return, would you have the courage to let them in? Or would you run like Dominic keeps trying to do? Drop your answer in the comments. I genuinely want to know what you would do. The morning passed slowly. Lena explored the mansion, discovering room after room of history and memory. She found a music room with a grand piano covered in a layer of dust. A conservatory filled with plants that somehow thrived without sunlight. A portrait gallery where Dominic's face appeared again and again across different eras, different fashions, always with those same haunted eyes. In one painting, he stood beside a woman with golden hair and kind eyes. Elizabeth, a small placard read, 1862. Lena understood then. The fear in his voice. The walls around his heart. He'd loved before, and loss had nearly destroyed him. She made herself a promise, standing before that portrait. If he let her in, even a little, she would never give him reason to regret it. That afternoon, Lena found herself drawn to the library. It was exactly what a Vampire King's library should be, floor-to-ceiling shelves, leather-bound volumes, a fireplace large enough to stand in, and the smell of old paper and secrets. She ran her fingers along the spines, reading titles in Latin, French, English spanning centuries. Her hand stopped on a slim journal tucked between larger books, its leather worn soft with handling. Unlike the other volumes, this one had no title on the spine. She knew she shouldn't. It was private. But something pulled at her, and before she could stop herself, she'd opened it to a random page. The handwriting was elegant, old-fashioned, unmistakably Dominic's. November 3rd, 1867. Elizabeth is gone. I held her hand as the fever took her, watched the light leave her eyes, felt her pulse stop beneath my fingers. I could have turned her. I wanted to. God, how I wanted to. But the old laws forbade it without council approval, and by the time they granted permission, she was already cold. I have lived 124 years, and I have never known pain like this. The humans speak of heartbreak as metaphor. For me, it is literal. I feel something in my chest has shattered beyond repair. I will continue. I will rule. I will endure. But I will never love again. The cost is too high. The loss too absolute. Better to be feared than to feel. Lena's eyes blurred with tears. She turned more pages, finding entry after entry of grief slowly hardening into resolve. She read about the political battles he'd fought, the enemies he'd destroyed, the careful distance he'd maintained from anything resembling emotional attachment. One entry, dated decades later, caught her attention. March 15, 1923. Julian asked me today if I ever regret the choice to remain alone. I told him regret is a luxury I cannot afford. But the truth is more complicated. I see human couples walking through the quarter, holding hands, stealing kisses, growing old together. I envy them their mortality. At least their love has an end date, a natural conclusion. Mine would stretch into eternity, and eternity is a long time to grieve. You found it. Lena spun around, clutching the journal to her chest. Dominic stood in the library doorway, his expression unreadable. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I shouldn't have. I wasn't trying to invade your privacy. It's all right." He crossed the room slowly, each step deliberate. "I don't show that journal to anyone. But I find I don't mind you reading it." She looked down at the worn leather in her hands. "You loved her so much." "I did." He stopped an arm's length away. "Elizabeth was the daughter of a merchant I did business with. Bright, curious, utterly unafraid of what I was. She used to tease me about my brooding. Said I looked like a storm cloud pretending to be a man." Lena almost smiled at that. "What happened? Why couldn't you save her?" Dominic moved to the window, staring out at the gardens below. "The old laws. Before I restructured the council, turning a human required unanimous approval from the elders. A process that took weeks. Elizabeth fell ill suddenly. Yellow fever. She was gone in 3 days." His voice dropped. "I petitioned them the moment she showed symptoms. They debated while she died. By the time they granted permission, her heart had stopped and her soul had moved on. Turning only works on the living." Lena set the journal down carefully. "What did you do? What do you think I did?" He turned, and his smile was cold, ancient. "I waited. I planned. And over the next 50 years, I systematically dismantled every elder who had delayed. Some I killed. Others I ruined. I took their power, their families, their legacies. And when I was done, I rewrote the laws so that no vampire would ever have to beg permission to save someone they loved. That's why they fear you," Lena said softly. "Not just because of your power. Because of your patience. Your willingness to wait generations for justice." Dominic nodded slowly. "I am not a good man, Lena. I am not even a man at all. I am something old and vengeful, and I have done terrible things in the name of love and loss. You should know this. You should understand exactly what you claim to love." Lena crossed to him, stopping close enough to touch but not quite touching. "I don't love you because I think you're good. I love you because I see you. The loneliness, the grief, the rage you've turned into purpose. I see all of it, Dominic. And I'm still here." His breath caught, an unnecessary reflex for a creature who didn't need to breathe. "You're either very brave or very foolish. Probably both." For a long moment, he just looked at her. Then his hand came up, fingers threading through her hair, tilting her face toward his. "I swore I would never do this again," he murmured. "Never let myself want something fragile. Maybe I'm stronger than I look. Maybe you are." He didn't kiss her. Not yet. But he rested his forehead against hers, closing his eyes, and Lena felt the tension in his body like a physical thing. A war between desire and fear. She could wait. She had waited 3 years already. A little longer wouldn't break her. Downstairs, the front door burst open with a crash. Dominic moved so fast Lena barely registered it. One moment he was touching her gently, the next he was gone, and she heard his voice echoing through the mansion, cold and deadly. "I thought I made myself clear about entering my home uninvited." Another voice responded, one that made Lena's blood freeze. "Where is she?" Derek screamed. "Where is my girlfriend, you monster?" Lena ran toward the sound, heart pounding, and stopped at the top of the staircase. Derek stood in the entrance hall, flanked by 2 men in tactical gear carrying weapons that gleamed with an unnatural silver light. Vampire hunting equipment. He'd actually done it. He'd armed himself and brought hunters to the Vampire King's door. But it was Dominic who commanded attention. He stood at the base of the stairs, completely still, radiating menace so intense the air seemed to vibrate with it. His eyes had gone full red, no amber remaining, just the crimson of an apex predator about to strike. "You brought hunters to my home," Dominic said softly. "You brought weapons into my sanctuary. And you dared to call me the monster?" Derek's bravado flickered, but he stood his ground. "She belongs to me. I don't care what you are. She's mine." Dominic laughed. It was the most terrifying sound Lena had ever heard. Warm and genuine and absolutely merciless. "Oh, you sweet, stupid boy. She doesn't belong to anyone. That's rather the point." He took one step forward, and all three men took a step back. "But since you insist on learning this lesson the hard way, allow me to educate you." What happened next would haunt Lena's dreams for years. Not because of the violence. Because of the precision. Dominic didn't rage. He didn't lose control. He moved through the hunters like water through a broken dam, graceful and inevitable. The first man's weapon clattered to the floor, his wrist bent at an angle that shouldn't be possible. The second didn't even have time to scream before he was unconscious, slumping against the wall. And Derek got the worst of it because Dominic didn't actually hurt him. He simply stood before the man who had bruised Lena's body and choked her throat, looked him in the eyes, and spoke. "Run." Dominic's voice carried the weight of centuries. "Run now, and I will give you a head start. 1 hour. After that, I'm going to find everyone you've ever loved. Everyone who shares your blood. Your mother in Florida. Your brother in Texas. Your nephew who just started kindergarten. And I'm going to introduce myself. Just to say hello. Just to let them know that their family includes a coward who hurts women. And then, in 10 years or 20 or 50, when you've almost forgotten about me, I'm going to return. And I'm going to take from you exactly what you tried to take from her. Her safety. Her peace. Her ability to trust." Derek was crying now, actually sobbing, all pretense of courage gone. "The hour starts now," Dominic said pleasantly. "I'd start running." Derek ran. The hunters dragged themselves after him. The door slammed. Silence. Dominic turned and looked up at Lena, still standing at the top of the stairs. His eyes faded from red back to amber, and suddenly he looked exhausted. "I'm sorry you had to see that," he said quietly. "That side of me." Lena descended the stairs slowly, step by step, until she stood before him. "You didn't kill them," she said. "I wanted to." His jaw tightened. "Every instinct I have wanted to tear him apart for what he did to you. But you didn't." "No. Because I realized something when he burst through that door. I realized I didn't want you to fear me. I've spent 2 centuries being feared, Lena. I'm very good at it. But I don't want that from you. Not from you." She reached up and touched his face, feeling the tension slowly drain from him. "I'm not afraid of you, Dominic. I never have been." "I know," he whispered. "That's what terrifies me." The days that followed were the strangest and most wonderful of Lena's life. With Derek gone and the immediate threat neutralized, she expected Dominic to gently usher her out of his home. To find her an apartment somewhere safe and return to his solitary existence. Instead, he did the opposite. "Stay," he said one morning over breakfast, casual as if he were discussing the weather. "Until we're certain he's truly left the region. It's the sensible choice." Lena agreed, telling herself it was practical. Safe. Not at all, because every morning she woke up hoping to see him. The mansion, which had seemed so cold and empty at first, began to feel like something else. Like home. Dominic, she discovered, was nothing like his reputation suggested. Or rather, he was exactly like it and simultaneously its complete opposite. Yes, he could be terrifying. Yes, his enemies spoke his name in whispers. But he was also the man who spent 3 hours teaching her to play chess and actually laughed, when she accidentally checkmated him through pure beginner's luck. "How did you do that?" he demanded, staring at the board in disbelief. "I have no idea," Lena admitted. "I was just trying to save my horsey." "Your horsey?" He pinched the bridge of his nose. "It's called a knight. It looks like a horse." "That's not the point. Does the Great Vampire King not like losing?" "The Great Vampire King," he said with exaggerated dignity, "doesn't lose." This was clearly a strategic retreat to lull you into false confidence. Lena grinned. Sure it was. He tried to maintain his stern expression but failed miserably. "Fine. You won. This time. We're playing again tomorrow and I'm not going easy on you." "You were going easy on me?" Dominic's only response was a grumble that made her laugh harder. She learned other things about him too. He played piano beautifully but claimed to hate it. He had a weakness for terrible crime novels that he hid behind more impressive volumes. He talked to his plants, something she discovered when she caught him lecturing a fern about its poor attitude towards sunlight. "You're nothing like what they say," she told him one evening. They were in the conservatory, surrounded by impossible flowers that bloomed without sun. "You pretend to be this cold, ruthless king, but you're actually—" "Don't," he warned. "Don't say something we'll both regret." "Kind," she finished anyway. "Underneath all the walls, you're kind." "I've killed people, Lena. More than I could ever count." "I know. I've destroyed entire bloodlines for revenge." "I know that too." "And you still think I'm kind?" She considered the question seriously. "I think kindness isn't about never doing harm. It's about choosing gentleness when you could choose cruelty. You could have killed Derek. You didn't. You could have terrified me with what you are. Instead, you made me breakfast and taught me chess and talked to your plants when you thought no one was listening." Dominic looked away, but not before she caught the flicker of something vulnerable in his expression. "You weren't supposed to see the plant thing." "Too late. I was having a serious conversation with that fern. About its attitude towards sunlight. It's a very moody fern." Lena moved closer, drawn by the warmth beneath his cold exterior. "Can I tell you something?" He tensed slightly. "That depends on what it is." "I'm happy here." She said it simply, honestly. "I know it's temporary. I know eventually I'll have to go back to real life, find a job, get an apartment, figure out who I am without fear. But right now, in this strange mansion with a vampire king who argues with his houseplants, I'm happier than I've been in years." Dominic was quiet for a long moment. Then, slowly, he reached out and took her hand. His fingers were cool against her skin, but the gesture was warm. "I'm happy too," he admitted. "I didn't think I could be anymore. After Elizabeth, after everything, I convinced myself that happiness was something that happened to other people. Something I'd given up the right to feel." He looked at their joined hands. "But then you appeared in that cafe, watching me with those eyes, and something shifted. Something I'd thought was dead started beating again." "Dominic." "I'm not good at this," he interrupted. "At vulnerability. At letting someone close. Every instinct I have says to push you away before I lose you too. But I'm tired, Lena. I'm so tired of being alone." "Then don't be." He looked up at her, and his eyes were fully amber now, no trace of the predator, just the man underneath. "If I let myself love you, I won't be able to stop. I don't do anything halfway. If you're mine completely. I'll protect you with everything I have. I'll destroy anyone who threatens you. I'll love you until the stars burn out and beyond. That's not a pretty thing, Lena. That's obsession dressed as devotion. I know, she whispered. I'm counting on it. The kiss, when it finally came, was nothing like she'd imagined. She'd expected hunger, dominance, the passion of a centuries-old predator claiming his prey. Instead, he kissed her like she was precious, like she might break, like he was asking permission with every gentle press of his lips. When they finally pulled apart, Lena was trembling. That was, she started. A beginning, he finished. If you want it to be, I want it to be. He smiled then, a real smile that transformed his entire face, and Lena understood why Elizabeth had loved him, why anyone who got past his walls would love him. Because beneath the monster and the king was just a man, lonely and longing and finally letting himself hope. They spent the rest of the evening on the conservatory floor, talking about everything and nothing. He told her about his human life, brief memories of a family he could barely remember. She told him about her childhood, the absent father, the mother who tried her best but wasn't enough. They traded wounds like gifts, scars like secrets, and with each revelation, the bond between them strengthened. I should warn you, Dominic said eventually, his arm around her shoulders as they watched the moon through the glass ceiling. Being with me isn't simple. I have enemies. Old ones who would love to find a weakness they could exploit. Like me. Like you. He kissed her temple. I won't let anyone hurt you. But the threat is real. You need to understand what you're walking into. I understand, Lena said. And I'm not walking anywhere except toward you. The night stretched around them, peaceful and full of promise. For the first time in 2 centuries, Dominic let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, he could have this. Could have her. He should have known better. Happiness had a way of being temporary, and the darkness was always watching, waiting for its chance to strike. But for now, in this moment, they were together. And that was enough. 2 weeks of happiness. 14 days of learning each other, of stolen kisses in doorways, of Dominic's rare laughter echoing through halls that had known only silence for decades. Lena should have known it couldn't last. It started with a letter. Old parchment sealed with wax, delivered by a vampire who refused to meet Lena's eyes. Dominic read it in his study, and when he emerged, something in his face had changed. Hardened. What is it? Lena asked. Nothing that concerns you. The coldness in his voice made her step back. Dominic, what's wrong? I said it's nothing. He moved past her toward the front door. I have business to attend to. Stay in the mansion. He was gone before she could respond, leaving her standing alone in the entrance hall with a chill creeping up her spine. Julian found her an hour later, still staring at the door. He does this, Julian said, not unkindly. When something from his past resurfaces, he retreats. Becomes the king instead of the man. What was in the letter? Julian hesitated. A summons. From the council. There's been a complaint filed against him. A complaint? For what? For you, Lena. Julian's expression was grim. For harboring a human in his home. For showing weakness. For letting his judgment be compromised by emotional attachment. The words hit like physical blows. That's ridiculous. I'm not compromising anything. You don't have to convince me. But the council is old and traditional. They see a king distracted by a human woman and they smell blood in the water. Enemies Dominic made decades ago are using this as an opportunity to challenge his authority. Lena's stomach dropped. This is my fault. No. This is politics. You're just the excuse they're using. She spent the rest of the day in anxious waiting, watching the clock, jumping at every sound. When night fell and Dominic still hadn't returned, she began to pace. He finally appeared near midnight, walking through the door like a ghost of himself. His face was pale, his eyes distant, his entire bearing radiating exhaustion and something darker. Defeat. What happened? Lena rushed to him. What did they say? Dominic looked at her, and for the first time since they'd met, she couldn't read his expression. They gave me a choice, he said flatly. Give you up or give up my throne. The world tilted. What? The council has decided that my attachment to you represents an unacceptable vulnerability. They believe I've grown soft. That I've forgotten what it means to be king. He laughed bitterly. They're not entirely wrong. So what did you tell them? I told them I would consider their terms. Lena felt something crack in her chest. You're actually considering it? Giving me up? What would you have me do? His voice rose for the first time. Throw away 2 centuries of work? Let my enemies tear apart everything I've built. I have responsibilities, Lena. I have a kingdom. People who depend on me. I can't abandon all of that for... He stopped himself, but the damage was done. For what? Lena whispered. For me? Say it, Dominic. You can't abandon your kingdom for some broken human you found in an apartment. That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? He turned away, running his hands through his hair in frustration. I meant that I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be a king and be with you. Every time I've let someone close, it's been used against me. Every vulnerability becomes a weapon in someone else's hands. So I'm a vulnerability now. Lena's voice had gone cold, matching his. I'm a weakness to be managed. You're a target, he snapped, spinning to face her. Don't you understand? If I keep you, they'll come for you. Not just the council. Every enemy I've ever made will see you as the way to hurt me. And I have made many enemies, Lena. Enemies who would enjoy nothing more than destroying something I love just to watch me suffer. Then protect me. Fight for me. You're the vampire king. You've destroyed entire bloodlines for revenge. You waited 70 years to punish a man who wronged you. But you won't stand up to your own counsel for someone you claim to love? The accusation hung between them, sharp as a blade. Dominic's expression shuddered completely. Perhaps I was wrong to bring you here. Perhaps I was wrong about all of it. The words were quiet, but they shattered something inside Lena. Then perhaps I should leave. Perhaps you should. They stared at each other across a distance that felt infinite. Lena waited for him to take it back. To reach for her. To show any sign that the man who'd kissed her so gently, who'd opened up to her so completely, was still in there. He didn't move. Fine, she said, her voice breaking despite her efforts to keep it steady. I'll be gone by morning. She turned and walked up the stairs, each step heavier than the last. She didn't look back because she knew if she did, she'd break down completely. Behind her, Dominic stood frozen in the entrance hall, watching her go. His fists clenched at his sides. Every instinct screamed at him to follow her, to apologize, to take back everything he'd said. But fear had wrapped around his heart like chains, the old familiar terror of loss, the certainty that loving something meant eventually burying it. Better to end it now. Better to push her away before the universe did it for him. Better to be alone than to watch her die. He told himself these lies until he almost believed them. Upstairs, Lena threw herself onto the bed and finally let the tears come. 3 years of loving him from afar. 2 weeks of actually being loved in return. And now this, cast aside because she was inconvenient. Because loving her was complicated. She'd been a fool to think she could ever be enough for someone like him. The night stretched on, endless and cold, two people in the same house but worlds apart. Both convinced they'd done the right thing. Both bleeding internally from the wound they'd inflicted on each other. I have to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. If someone you loved pushed you away because they were scared of losing you, would you give up? Would you walk away? Or would you fight for them even when they couldn't fight for themselves? Tell me in the comments what you would do in Lena's place right now. Would you leave in the morning? Or would you stay and make him see what he's throwing away? In his study, Dominic poured blood wine with shaking hands and drank until his thoughts blurred. The portrait of Elizabeth watched from the wall, her kind eyes seeming to judge him. What would you have me do? He asked the painting. Let her become another ghost in my gallery? Another name I can't speak without pain? Elizabeth didn't answer. She never did. But somewhere in the back of his mind, in a voice that sounded suspiciously like his own conscience, he heard the truth he was running from. You're not pushing her away to protect her. You're pushing her away to protect yourself. Because loving someone is terrifying. Because hope is the cruelest thing of all. He finished the wine and reached for more. It was going to be a very long night. Dawn crept through the mansion like an unwelcome guest, gray light filtering through curtains neither of them had bothered to close. Lena sat on the edge of her bed, a small bag packed at her feet. She brought almost nothing to this place. She'd leave with even less. The clothes Dominic had provided, she left folded on the chair. The jewelry he'd casually given her, small gifts that meant everything, sat on the dresser. She would take nothing of his. Except the memories. Those she couldn't leave behind no matter how much she wanted to. Her hand hovered over the door handle. One turn and she'd be in the hallway. Down the stairs. Out the door. Back to a world where she was nobody, where Dominic Ashford was just a name whispered in fear, where the past 2 weeks would become a beautiful dream she'd eventually convince herself never happened. Just turn the handle, she told herself. Just go. But her hand wouldn't move. 3 floors down, Dominic sat in the wreckage of his study. Bottles empty. Books scattered. A chair overturned from where he'd thrown it against the wall sometime around 3 in the morning. He hadn't slept. Couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her face. The hurt. The betrayal. The moment hope died in her eyes because he'd killed it. Perhaps you should leave. Perhaps I should. His own words echoed back at him, mocking. 2 centuries of eloquence, of manipulation, of knowing exactly what to say to destroy his enemies, and those were the words he'd chosen. Push her away. Hurt her before she could be hurt worse. Coward, he thought. After everything, you're still a coward. Julian appeared in the doorway, took in the destruction, and wisely said nothing. She's packing, was all he offered. She'll be gone within the hour. Dominic didn't respond. Julian stepped closer. I've served you for 112 years. I've watched you wage wars, topple kingdoms, and remake vampire society in your image. You've never been afraid of anything. Everyone's afraid of something. Yes. And you're afraid of her. Not of what she could do to you, but of what losing her would do to you. Julian's voice softened. But here's what you're not seeing. You're already losing her. Right now. Every minute you sit in this room feeling sorry for yourself, she's slipping further away. The question isn't whether you'll experience loss. It's whether you'll experience it having fought or having surrendered. The council. The council can burn for all I care, and so can you, frankly. Julian crossed his arms. You're Dominic Ashford. You've faced down armies. You've waited decades for revenge. You once told me that patience and persistence could topple any obstacle. So why are you letting a group of ancient politicians dictate your happiness? Dominic looked up at his oldest friend, something shifting in his expression. What would you have me do? I'd have you do what you've always done. Fight. Win. And make anyone who stands in your way regret the day they were born. Julian smiled grimly. The Dominic I know doesn't surrender the things he loves. He holds on until his fingers break and then holds on with his teeth. The words landed somewhere deep. Dominic thought about Elizabeth. About watching her die while bureaucrats debated. About the decades of loneliness that followed. About swearing never again and meaning it. But then he thought about Lena. Her laugh when she accidentally checkmated him. The way she touched his face like he was precious. How she'd looked at his journal, read about Elizabeth, and instead of running, had moved closer. She wasn't afraid of his darkness. She saw it and loved him anyway. And he'd repaid her by becoming the very thing she deserved to escape. A man who hurt her because he was scared. What am I doing? He whispered. Being an idiot, Julian supplied helpfully. But there's still time to fix it. Dominic rose from the floor, something igniting in his eyes. The red flickered, but this time it wasn't rage. It was determination. Get me the council's contact, he said, his voice shifting into something commanding. And prepare the Great Hall. Julian's eyebrows rose. You are going to. I'm going to do what I should have done last night. He straightened, and suddenly he was the king again, but different. Warmer. More alive. I'm going to fight for her. And God help anyone who tries to stop me. Julian grinned. Now that's the Dominic I know. What about Lena? Dominic was already moving toward the door. Don't let her leave. Whatever you have to do, keep her in this house until I return. And if she won't stay? Then remind her, Dominic said over his shoulder, that the man she fell in love with doesn't give up. On anything. Or anyone. He disappeared into the morning light, moving with purpose for the first time in hours. Upstairs, Lena's hand finally closed around the door handle. She pulled it open and found Julian standing in the hallway, an apologetic expression on his face. I'm sorry, he said. But you can't leave yet. Excuse me? The king has requested that you remain until he returns. He has something he needs to say. Something important. Lena's jaw tightened. If he wanted to say something, he had all night to do it. I'm done waiting for a man who can't decide if I'm worth the trouble. Julian stepped aside, gesturing toward the stairs. You were right. You don't have to wait. You're free to go, and I won't stop you. But I'm asking you to give him one more chance. 1 hour. After that, if you still want to leave, I'll personally drive you anywhere you want to go. Why should I? Because I've known him for over a century, and I've never seen him love anyone the way he loves you. Julian's voice was earnest. He's scared, Lena. Terrified. The last time he let himself feel this way, he watched the woman die in his arms. He's not pushing you away because he doesn't care. He's pushing because he cares too much and doesn't know how to survive losing you. Lena hesitated, her grip on her bag loosening slightly. 1 hour? She asked. 1 hour, Julian promised. If he doesn't convince you to stay, I'll help you pack myself. The silence stretched between them. Finally, slowly, Lena set her bag down. 1 hour, she agreed. But this is his last chance. Julian smiled with relief. That's all he needs. He turned and headed down the hallway, leaving Lena alone with her thoughts, her heart pounding with something that felt dangerously like hope. She moved to the window and looked out at the city awakening below. Somewhere out there, Dominic was fighting for her. Or so Julian claimed. She wanted to believe it. Wanted it so desperately it scared her. But she'd believed before. In Derek. In promises that turned to bruises. In love that became a cage. The difference, a small voice whispered, is that Dominic never hurt you. He pushed you away, yes. But he never raised a hand. Never choked you. Never made you feel small. He just got scared. And scared people sometimes say stupid things. Lena pressed her forehead to the cool glass and closed her eyes. 1 hour, she told herself. I can wait 1 more hour. She just hoped it would be worth it. The council chamber doors didn't open. They exploded. Dominic Ashford walked through the splinters like they were morning mist, his presence filling the ancient hall with something electric and dangerous. Every vampire in the room, some older than him, some who'd ruled when Rome still stood, felt their instincts scream danger. Good morning, he said pleasantly, as if he hadn't just destroyed 1,000-year-old oak with his bare hands. I believe we have unfinished business. Alder Marcus, the one who'd pushed hardest for the ultimatum, stood slowly. You were given time to consider. I've considered, Dominic interrupted, his voice carrying that British accent that only emerged when he was truly angry. And I've decided you're all unbelievably stupid. The room erupted in outraged voices. Dominic silenced them with a raised hand. Let me explain something to you, he continued, moving to the center of the chamber with predatory grace. 243 years ago, you made me king because I was ruthless. Because I didn't let emotion cloud my judgment. Because I was the monster you needed to keep order. He smiled, and it was beautiful and terrible. Well, congratulations. I'm still that monster. But now I'm a monster in love. And that makes me infinitely more dangerous. Elder Catherine leaned forward. You would throw away your crown for a human girl? No. Dominic's eyes blazed red. I'm keeping both. The crown and the girl. And if any of you have a problem with that, we can settle it right now. The old way. Combat. To the death. The chamber went silent. You see, Dominic continued, his voice dropping to something intimate and lethal, you've forgotten who I am. You've gotten comfortable with me playing politics, following rules, pretending to care about your opinions. But I destroyed the entire Rousseau bloodline for touching what was mine. I waited 70 years to repay a single insult. I reshaped vampire law because the woman I loved died while you debated. So let me be crystal clear. If any of you, any single one of you, touches Lena or uses her against me, I will end you. Not just you. Your bloodlines. Your allies. Your descendants unto the 10th generation. I will erase you so thoroughly that archaeology won't find your bones. He paused, letting the threat sink in. Or, he said, brightening considerably, we can all agree that who I love is my business, and we can continue our mutually beneficial arrangement where you pretend to have authority and I pretend to respect it. Marcus swallowed audibly. The council withdraws its ultimatum. How wonderfully reasonable of you. Dominic turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and gentlemen? Ladies? The next time you try to use someone I love as leverage against me, I won't be nearly this diplomatic. I'll simply kill you all and find a new council. Are we understood? Murmured agreements echoed through the chamber. Lovely chat, Dominic said cheerfully, and walked out through the hole where the doors used to be. He moved through the city like lightning, desperate to get back, to fix what he'd broken, to tell her everything he should have said last night. The mansion appeared before him, and he could smell her scent, jasmine and warmth, still there. She hadn't left. Relief nearly brought him to his knees. He found her in the library, standing exactly where she'd been that day she found his journal, sunlight making her dark hair glow like mahogany. "You stayed," he said softly. She turned, and the wariness in her eyes broke his heart. "Julian said you had something to tell me. You have 10 minutes. I love you." The words hung between them, simple and devastating. Lena's breath caught. "Dominic. No, let me finish." He crossed to her in 3 strides, stopping just out of reach, giving her the choice to close the distance or maintain it. "I love you, and I'm a coward, and I'm sorry. I'm sorry I pushed you away. I'm sorry I let fear make my choices. I'm sorry I made you feel like you weren't worth fighting for when you're worth everything. The council can burn in hell. I just told them as much." He ran a hand through his hair, suddenly looking vulnerable. "I gave them a choice. Accept you or fight me. They chose wisely. You threatened the entire vampire council? For me? I'd threaten God himself for you, Lena." His voice cracked slightly. "I've spent 150 years avoiding this feeling because I was terrified of the pain it could bring. But you know what I realized sitting in my destroyed study at 3 in the morning? The pain of losing you to my own stupidity hurt worse than anything I'd been running from." She was crying now, silent tears sliding down her cheeks. "I know I hurt you," he continued. "I know I have no right to ask for forgiveness. But I'm asking anyway. Stay with me. Not for a week or a month or a year. Forever. Let me turn you when you're ready. Let me love you the way I should have from the beginning. Completely. Obsessively. Without reservation." He dropped to his knees then, the vampire king kneeling before a human woman, and pulled out a ring. Not a modern diamond, but something older. A ruby surrounded by pearls, the band carved with symbols of protection. "This was my mother's," he said quietly. "From when I was human. It's the only thing I have from that life. I've kept it for 2 centuries, waiting. I didn't know what I was waiting for until I saw you in that cafe, watching me like I was worth saving." Just like in the kitchen that first morning, he was offering her something, waiting to see if she'd accept it. Lena looked at him, this ancient, powerful, terrifying man on his knees, offering her forever with shaking hands. "You absolute idiot," she whispered. His face started to fall. Then she dropped to her knees too, cupping his face in her hands. "You beautiful, dramatic, infuriating idiot. Yes. Of course yes. I've loved you for 3 years, Dominic. You think one bad night was going to change that?" He kissed her then, and it was nothing like their first kiss. This was desperate and grateful and full of promises. This was the kiss of a man who'd almost lost everything and sworn never to be that foolish again. When they finally pulled apart, he slipped the ring onto her finger with reverent care. "The council might still cause problems," he warned. "Let them try." Lena's smile was fierce. "I've got the scariest vampire in history on my side." "Scariest?" "Most dramatic, certainly." He laughed, the sound filling the library with warmth. "I did make quite an entrance at the council. Did you really threaten to kill them all? Every last one?" He pulled her closer. "I meant it too. Anyone who tries to separate us learns what happens when you threaten a king's queen." "Queen, huh? Well, you will be. After the wedding. And the turning, when you're ready." He kissed her forehead. "We have time now. All the time in the world." They rose together, hands intertwined, and Lena felt the weight of the past months, years, finally lifting. She'd loved him from afar, thinking herself unworthy. She'd survived Derek, thinking herself weak. But here she was, wearing the Vampire King's ring, having brought him to his knees with nothing but her absence. Sometimes the greatest love stories started in the strangest places. A glimpse through a cafe window. A door exploding inward. A choice between power and love that turned out not to be a choice at all. As Dominic led her upstairs, toward their future, toward forever, Lena thought about the woman she'd been just weeks ago. Broken. Frightened. Watching from shadows. That woman never could have imagined this. But then again, the best love stories were always the unexpected ones. The ones where kings fell for broken girls. Where monsters chose love over power. Where loneliness ended not with a whisper but with a declaration of war against anyone who tried to separate them. Outside, New Orleans pulsed with its usual magic. But inside the Ashford mansion, two souls who'd been alone for far too long finally found home. In each other. So I need to know, and this is important. If you had to choose between keeping your power, your reputation, everything you built, or fighting for the person you love, what would you choose? Would you be like Dominic in the beginning, letting fear win? Or would you storm into that council chamber ready to burn it all down for love? Tell me in the comments what matters more, safety or love? Listen, if you made it this far, you just spent 40 minutes with me, feeling every heartbreak and triumph alongside Lena and Dominic. You're literally part of our vampire love story family now, and families don't leave each other hanging. Hit that subscribe button right now because I promise you, I'm up at 3 a.m. crafting these stories just for you, pouring my soul into every word. Don't break my heart by leaving without subscribing. And tell me in the comments where in the world you're watching from because I want to know where our family lives. Are you Team Dominic or did you want Lena to make him suffer longer? I see you there, feeling all the emotions. Just click the button. One click. That's all. Make this storyteller's night. And if you loved watching Dominic literally break down doors for his queen, if your heart raced during that council scene, then you're going to be absolutely obsessed with the next story. Click the image on your screen right now where another vampire king discovers his mate is the very human sent to destroy him. Trust me, you need this next story in your life immediately.